Brief DVMs here with our homemade celery salt. Celery salt is something that we use in a lot of our cooking. We really enjoy the flavor, so we are going to make our own here instead of always buying it from the store. So the celery is grown in our garden. We have found that celery does seem to like clay, so it grows very well in our garden, and this year is a bumper crop, so we're going to be doing some dill pickled celery, which is where these stalks are going. And then we are going to take the leaves from all of the stalks and we're going to dehydrate them so we can make our celery salt. So here's my daughter. She is pulling the leaves off of the stem, what is left of the stem, because you don't want any of that thick stem to go into your dehydrator. It does not dehydrate well, and it also prevents then the leaves from dehydrating as well, because they can't really move around when they're on the stem, and the stem has a lot of water in it. So I know it takes a bit of extra time, but we pull every leaf off of the stems and keep them just as leaves that go into the dehydrator. Now we're going to do this, and we're going to fill up our bucket here. That's a 2-gallon pail. We're going to fill that pretty much to the top with our celery leaves. Now we do want to make sure that you push it down a little to get an accurate measurement of how many leaves you have, because for our pail we are going to add 1 tablespoon of salt at the end. So you want to know how much you're putting in to your dehydrator on a wet basis. So here we go. Now you can see how you can nicely lay these things out because we did take them off the stems. And we're going to just make a fairly thin layer. You don't have to have it one leaf everywhere because it will get shrunk up as it dehydrates. But you don't want it too thick so it doesn't dehydrate well. I like using these plastic trays. We also have silicone trays that help keep your product from sticking to the dehydrator, and they also make obviously it easy to go in and out without taking out those metal trays out of the dehydrator. So we're just going to keep loading up more trays here with the leaves. There's a lot of leaves, so we're going to make a lot of trays here. And again, that's what you want though. You want to make your celery salt, you're going to want a large volume of celery leaves, just because they really do crush down after the dehydration, and we're going to powderize it, obviously, to make our celery salt. So you need a lot of leaves, but like I said, we had a bumper crop of celery, so this is only about a foot of our row of celery, so we have 9 more feet to go. When we do turn on the dehydrator here, we are going to turn it up to as high as it goes, which is 160 degrees, simply because then it gets our drying done faster. So we're going to keep it at 160. We're going to go up to about 8 hours, because that's about how long we found takes for our weather and our leaves to get done. Obviously you can adjust for what you need at your temperature and everything else. It does also work to dehydrate the leaves in a dehydrator that does not have heat. It just takes a lot longer just using the air motion to dehydrate them, but there's nothing wrong with that. So there you go, we have a lot of trays in there, which is why we have a big dehydrator. I'm going to get it started. There they are, still bright and green, which is what we want to see, just dry and crispy. And as you can see, they're probably about 50% of the size that they used to be. They really shrunk up as the water left them. I like to use these trays too because then you can just pour your product into a container like this. And as you can see, I know they look a lot alike before they started, but they're just crispy. They fall apart, they just powderize in your hand as you work with them. So that's exactly what we want. You really want to make sure you have a dry product of the celery leaves when you do this, just because if it's not dry, it will, just go bad on you quickly, and will get sticky and yucky, and you won't want to use it. So you want to make sure your celery leaves are really, really dry when you start this process. If you have any question how dry they are, just give them a few more hours. You can't go wrong. So you can also dehydrate them in the oven. It just takes my oven does not go down to 160. But you can do it at a little higher temperature, and it takes about the same amount of time, a little less because it's hotter. But there's our leaves, and we're going to put them now in the blender. Now the blender can make a very nice fine powder out of this, so that's why we choose the blender over the food processor. And so we started with those 2 gallons of the leaves, and now we're getting it down into our 8-cup blender pitcher here. So you can see already how much we've lost. We've already lost half of our size. But that's, like I said, what you want, because you don't want to be storing a quart of celery salt that you have to use. So we're going to get it down to a nice powder. The one thing that does happen with the blender and dry products is that you can create kind of an air pocket around the blades as you turn up the speed. And if you don't turn up the speed on here, you will burn out your motor since the fan will not come on. So we do always turn up the speed. We do end up with a few air pockets as we get through the process here. The device comes with a plastic rod that you can poke in through the top hole there to push your food down onto the blades and not hit the blades. It's obviously measured just right, but I prefer to just take off the pitcher and shake it a little. It works just as well, and I don't have to get another piece of equipment dirty. We'll just have to do that a few times to get our fine powder. Once we get that fine powder, it really works well here in the blender. So now we got that fine powder going. You can see we're starting to build up a dust inside the blender pitcher, and that dust you will breathe in if you're not careful. So if you want to, you can just wait a few seconds or a minute after you finish blendering to open it up, but you can see even how some of that dust came out into the room. So if you don't want to breathe the celery dust, you might want to wait a few seconds. Now I'm going to put in our tablespoon of salt. Like I said, if you want to put in more, you're very welcome. We don't like the saltiest of products, so we only put in 1 here, but a lot of people will put in 2 for this amount of leaves. We're just going to really get that salt mixed in. We don't want it to have any pockets of salt when you scoop it out, and it really helps turn that salt crystal into as fine a powder as possible. And now you can really see the dust growing here. So we're going to let it sit for a few minutes before we open it. There we go. Now that is an actual jelly jar there. So we went from 2 gallons down to 1 cup of celery salt. So again, nice saving on the size and storage space. So there you have it, your very own celery salt. Now I know it is bright green compared to the stuff you buy at the store, which is much browner stuff. Typically, at least around us, you get celery seed and salt, but I did not want to let my celery go to seed, so we are using the leaves. We find that the flavor is just as good. It's just a bit greener. So there you have it, our cup of celery salt. This will probably last for about 6 months. We're going to make another batch when we cut more celery here, and make sure we have enough for the year. Thanks for watching, and please like or subscribe to help us out.